Good morning. So we'll have a discussion today on a ward round scenario on nipple discharge and an operative scenario of modified electrostomy. With me today is Dr. Ditiman Moitra. He is Associate Professor of Surgery at Calcutta Medical College. So welcome, Ditiman. So we have the scenario.
Good morning, everyone. Scenario is now 40-year lady present with plenty nipple discharge. How will you proceed? The picture shows the lady.
Dr. Jyoti, why is the age important in history?
So, as the age progresses, the chance of malignancy risk is more. So, age is more important.
Any other importance of age?
For management purposes, investigation purposes.
Irrespective of the nature of discharge, whether it is bloody or purulent or dirty discharge, what is the importance of age apart from the malignancy aspect? We will answer like this, that the spectrum of ND and the various causes of nipple discharge in the different age groups are different. A lady who is young, less than 15 or maybe less than 25 years, she may have a congenital nipple inversion which may give rise to subarular sepsis and purulent discharge from the ducts or fistula, mammary fistula. However, a lady who is in her menopausal age group, she may have duct ectasia which may be associated with periductal mastitis complex. And that lady also may have dirty discharge. If there is periductal mastitis along with duct ectasia, then there will be purulent discharge. As long as bloody discharge is concerned, the percentage of coexistent malignancy with bloody discharge will increase with age. In less than 40 years, it is 3%. 40 to 60 years, it is 10%. More than 60 years, it is 32%. So, age is important in history. So, what other points in history will you ask to assess the nature of discharge and the possible etiology?
I want to elaborate the discharge history. So, I want to ask whether it is from both breaks and onset and duration, whether it is from both breaks, or whether the patient can say that whether it is from multiple sides of the breast and associated with it. And it's occurring spontaneously or any she is giving any pressure, and whether it is significant amount like persisting for a long time, and associated symptoms like any lump is the patient is able to form any lump or any surrounding eczema changes, patient is having pain. I want to elicit that history, and I want to elicit history of trauma also.
So basically, the history will be directed to, first of all, pinpoint the etiology and also to plan the management, what to do. So first of all, you will see whether there is bilateral discharge. If there is bilateral discharge, you will think of physiological and systemic causes. So you will think about pituitary tumors, chorioadenoma, or you will think about thyroid problem. If there is hypothyroidism, TSH increases. Now, previously, they used to say that there is one hormone called prolactin stimulating hormone, but now they are saying that TSH and PSH are same. So basically, hypothyroid patients with increased TSH will have stimulation of prolactin and they may have milky discharge. Okay. Number two, whether it is coming from a single duct or multiple duct. Single duct is serious. So which conditions are serious? Sanguinous, serosanguinous, single duct, spontaneous discharge. These are serious features, must be addressed. So, you will try to ascertain whether there is discharge from history. You will try to ascertain whether there is history from discharge from multiple ducts or single duct. Then, whether it is coming out spontaneously or whether it comes out on pressure. If it comes out on pressure, it is not that important. Then the nature of discharge, whether it is bloody, serous, watery. How will you differentiate between serous and watery discharge from history? Both are colorless. Both are colorless. Patient will say that it is sticky. One is sticky, stains the clothes. The other one will be watery and it will dry up. The next thing is whether the discharge is copious or less. It has two implications. Suppose you have diagnosed the etiology to be duct ectasia. Suppose later on you have diagnosed it to be duct ectasia. If the discharge is scanty, dirty scanty discharge, you don't need to do anything. In duct ectasia, the only indication for surgery would be if there is periductal mastitis or if there is profuse discharge causing social embarrassment. However, if it is bloody discharge, then small amount of discharge may also be a matter of concern, because it has been seen that papillomata which are associated with scant bleeding have more chances of that. So amount is important. Then, as you have said, lump is important because papilloma etc. will be associated with lump. Even inflammatory lumps could be there, subareolar sepsis, periductal mastitis. So you have to ask about pain. Recent onset nipple retraction. Somebody may have nipple retraction from childhood. Nipple inversion is okay. And recent onset is important. Okay. Apart from this, you have said any lump in the axilla also you have to ask, any lump in any other part of the body, like to ask. So once you have taken this history, you will go for the examination.
Is a drug history important for a patient having a nipple discharge? What drug history? When do you think drug history may be important for patient having nipple discharge? Antipsychotic drugs. Yes. Antipsychotic drugs. Others. A very common drug. People used to take for a long time and then they come with nipple discharge. Because that's something with a central stimulation.
नहीं हर रोज खाते हैं ऐसे मेरा एसिडिटी हुआ कुछ खा लिया क्या खाते हैं don't pay
it has got a central effect.
This has to be asked. And family history is also very important. Family history, anybody who has the history of cancer in the family or cancer in the opposite breast, that patient with a nipple discharge in the opposite breast must be given importance. So that has to be investigated properly. Now coming to examination, anything specific for nipple areola assessment? See, basically triple assessment is the pillar of assessment for any patient with breast complaints. You will examine breast as you do for all other cases. You will look for any lump, you will look for the normal breast, abnormal breast, quadrant wise or even clockwise. You will look for the axillary tail, you will lift the breast, look at the inferior mammary fold, you will feel for the axilla, you will do all that. But for nipple areola complex now, a new method of demonstrating assessing the nipple areola is being described. You will hold the nipple in between your two fingers, thumb and normal finger, thumb at 6 o'clock, another index finger at 12 o'clock, and you will try to roll and palpate the milk ducts. And again you will do from 3 o'clock, putting your fingers on 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock, you will try to roll. If the ducts are rollable, then you will think that the discharge is not due to periductal mastitis or inflammatory cause. If there is inflammatory cause, the ducts become thickened and they are not rollable. Okay, they become fibrous in nature. And apart from that, you will feel for lumps just beneath the areola. Okay.
And another important cause for nipple discharge is Paget's disease of the nipple. So you have to examine the nipple areola to look for any ulceration. Because
whether there is any
weeping,
or you will have to ask whether it started from the nipple and then spread to the areola, because it will generally start from the nipple and there will be complete erosion of the nipple. Okay, in Paget's disease. Paget's disease differential diagnosis could be and ready melanoma.
So do a good history taking and a good clinical examination as you're doing a routine examination of breast. So this one part is done.
Then now, how will you? Now, suppose you have examined and you have felt a lump, and there is a tender lump, there is a non-tender lump, and there is no lump. Then how will you investigate?
Three scenarios. One patient having no lump, a tender lump, small tender lump, and there is a very discrete small lump.
And there could be two more things: fistula, mammary fistula, and mammillary fistula. What is the difference between mammary fistula and mammillary fistula?
Case of periductal mastitis.
Mammillary fistula will be, the opening will be on the nipple, any side of the nipple. Apart from the normal ductal openings on the nipple, there will be an opening, abnormal opening in the nipple. That is mammillary. And mammary fistula is anywhere on the areola or areolocutaneous junction. Now you have three scenarios: painful tender lump, painless lump, and no lump. So how will you assess? Further assess. The patient is 40 years. So what will be your preferred imaging?
Mammogram is fine.
So when you order for mammogram, what is the radiologist expected to do? Is it only the mammogram that he will report? When you are writing mammogram, in all good setup, mammography means the radiological film that you get apart from an ultrasound, real-time ultrasound assessment by the radiologist. Unless he has done that, the mammographic examination is incomplete. Okay, you say like this because often you have seen that BIRAT 0 is reported in mammogram, but BIRAT 0 is on the basis of only the mammogram. Whenever there is BIRAT 0, they will say ultrasound has to be done. Then they will do ultrasound and finally give a BIRAT score of 1, 2, 3, whatever. Okay, so mammography is incomplete without ultrasound assessment because even if you detect a lump on mammography, unless you've done ultrasound, you cannot characterize the size, the quantity, the vascularity of the lump, and BIRAT's lexicon won't be fulfilled. Fee and ultrasound. Then how to get the third? What is the third pillar of the analysis? Cytology or histology? So what will you do?
You are getting two things. You are getting a discharge, and on imaging, it will corroborate your clinical finding. Okay, so the scenario you have already said. Anything to do with the discharge?
Same for aspiration psychology.
Discharge. Why aspiration psychology? You see, this is the bloody discharge.
Coming out on its own. Why do you need to aspirate? Send the discharge for cytology. Now, how can you collect the material? Suppose there is very scant discharge. You can cover the nipple with the sterile, transparent that Tegaderm, and then the secretions will collect over 1 or 2 days. Ask the patient to come back after 2 days. Remove the Tegaderm. You will get, even if there is scanty daily discharge, the discharge will build up. After 2 days, you will find adequate material. Suppose there is copious discharge, then you can directly take cytology, prepare the slide and see. So in cytology, what is generally seen? Generally, if you have seen the reports, it is reported as proteinaceous material in amorphous background, mostly uncharacteristic. Sometimes there will be epithelial fronts because papillomata are, intraductal papillomata are structures with stalk and they discomet. And those cells can be collected in cytology. Now with the emergence of immunocytochemistry, you can perform immunocytochemical studies on the cells and then you can characterize the nature of lesion, whether it is a low-grade DCIS or an atypical ductal hypoplasia and all those. I mean, you can have an idea, high-grade DCIS, low-grade DCIS, you can differentiate. But they are saying that in most cases, cells will be scanty and you may not have any definite conclusion from the study. I mean, discharge analysis. So another way is to do a ductoscopy. Take ductal washings, but it is not available everywhere and it is also not a very reliable procedure because while doing ductoscopy, the ducts are so thin. If by putting a fiber scope, you may often damage the duct and you may give rise to a fistula. So it is not preferred. So the next thing.
So analysis of the discharge is not always very helpful in coming to diagnosis. But you have to do it. Once we have discharge, do that. But most of the time, you may not get a conclusive diagnosis from just analyzing the discharge itself. Okay, so you have done a ultrasound and mammography, and in situations where you don't have a palpable lump, even this investigation may not be a very fruitful investigation to come to diagnosis. So stick to this scenario that you have a situation, no palpable lump, and ultrasound and mammography is also not very conclusively giving you a diagnosis. Maybe that there is a small ductal dilution in the terminal area. How to proceed in that situation?
Patients have significant discharge. I will go with the management. Patients not having that much.
Very significant discharge. We are discussing a patient who has been in the clinic
40 years bloody discharge.
That is a significant. It's a pathological discharge.
Then I will go with the surgery.
Surgery. No, there are so many gadgets in your hand. You cannot go for surgery because earlier it was microtopography straight away. But now it's not microtopography. There are other investigations where, because the idea of this patient evaluation is either do intervention or don't do intervention. Most of the benign lesions will spontaneously get corrected. Some may be able to medical treatment. So microtreatment is not the answer. That was the answer maybe 5 years back. But today, nobody will accept. So I give it a scenario. Not well now. Ultrasound mammography has not been able to conclude maybe it's a pilot to diagnosis. What to do next? What other investigation can help in this scenario?
What other imaging do you have in hand?
How do you do topography? You put a catheter? What catheter you can put in the duct?
Nylon wire, then how can you? I mean, it does not have a lumen. How can you?
Yes, you say cannula, not catheter.
Which cannula?
Pass a catheter.
Yes, no, depending on the.
It's a very fine pitch. So you have to identify the duct and cannulate the duct.
And you can see finished defects. Okay. Now suppose on ultrasound, I have two scenarios. One is there is a heterogeneous collection with floating debris. How will you proceed? And suppose there is an intraductal swelling with vascularity. So how will you proceed?
First scenario, we don't have protect this. I will and I will say
what kind of antibiotic will you give? What is the difference of microbiome of the ductal discharge in Western population and Indian population? In West, they have demonstrated anaerobes also, but in most of the studies in India, they have shown there are about 800 microbes, but anaerobes are not there, mostly cephalobuffal groups. So you will use anticephalobuffal, and you will try to avoid any antibiotic which is there in the algorithm of management of tuberculosis. You will not give it first. Okay. You will try to use anticephalobuffal. You will use anaerobic also. Antibiotics which are less used, like erythromycin, azithromycin, along with tinidazole, long course, 2 to 3 weeks you will give. If there is sizable collection, you will aspirate it also and send for culture. And you will start empirical antibiotics. Depending on culture report, you will change the antibiotics also if needed. Now, once the breast has become quiescent, the subanular sepsis has settled, and you can observe the patient if the patient is less than 50 years. However, if there is recurrent sepsis or there is formation of fistula, then you have to do a duct excision. Now, how much of the duct will you remove if this infective etiology is diagnosed? No, it is said that the terminal part of the duct, if it is extirpated, then it is enough. So, 1.5 centimeter versus 3 centimeter, now randomized control trials are being carried out. Till now, the masters of this subject like Professor Hughes, then Dixon, they used to say up to 3 centimeter is adequate. Now trials are going on to prove that even 1.5 centimeter of ductal depth from the nipple is enough to be removed in case of infective disease. Okay. Now coming to the next scenario, there is
chance of better go to surgery.
Apart from what it can be, if there is a ductal lesion, intraductal lesion, it can be ductal papilla is one person. Second possibility. But already it should be a carcinoma also.
Ductal carcinoma in situ or even.
And that differentiation is important. Now that differentiation between a duct papilloma and carcinoma is important because the management will be different.
So what happens is you can do, now suppose you have got that lesion, intraductal lesion. So you can obviously do USD guided core needle biopsy from that lump. But the radiologists say that it is very difficult to target a moving lesion. First of all, it is inside a duct. And number two, it is not fixed. It has a stock. It is moving. So it is very difficult to take representative tissue even on ultrasound guidance from such a lump. So in that case, you may do a diagnostic total middle duct excision. And if you are suspecting papilloma or any other such pathology, you have to go up to the end of the TTLU, and that is up to 2 inches or 5 centimeters. So you have to go to a depth of 5 centimeters and you remove the entire ductal bone from beneath the nipple areola. The upper side, you won't understand that you have removed anything from within. The nipple and areola will look exactly similar from outside as before operation. However, from within you will remove the ductal bone. Now suppose you have removed the ductal bone and you have found single papilloma, multiple papilloma, atypical ductal hyperplasia and DCIS. So if you have found these 4 entities, how will you approach further? Surgery done, the diagnostic procedure that you have done becomes therapeutic. You don't need to do anything else. If it is ADH, how will you differentiate between atypical ductal hyperplasia and DCIS? What is the difference? Are they different lesions? High grade DCIS is a different entity, but low grade DCIS is same as atypical ductal hyperplasia if atypical ductal hyperplasia involves more than 2 contiguous ducts, or the largest focus of atypical ductal hyperplasia is more than 2 mm, then that same pathology is called DCIS, ductal carcinoma in situ. Now, if it is atypical ductal hyperplasia, you don't need to be bothered about the margins. You have removed the duct and you will put the patient on 5 years of tamoxifen. However, if it is DCIS, what will you do? How much margin is recommended in DCIS? It is more than invasive carcinoma. In invasive carcinoma, it is no tumor on int margin, but for DCIS, it is minimum 2 mm. Microscopic 2 mm margin. Why? Any idea? Any postulation? Hypothesis. See, what happens is in invasive carcinoma, what do? We give chemotherapy. So even small outlying focus, etc., will be taken care of by that. But DCIS is not chemosensitive, so you have to be extra cautious about the margin. So this is one postulate. It is not proved. Okay. Now suppose it is DCIS and it is margin positive. What will you do? You can do a central core excision wherein you remove the nipple areola and the entire breast tissue just beneath the nipple areola. That is called central core excision. And according to NSCPP 17 trial, what will you do? 17 and 24. You will have to give radiotherapy, and even if in DCIS it is ERPR positive, you have to treat with tamoxifen. So ERPR positive DCIS, tamoxifen has to be given, and if you are doing lumpectomy for DCIS, you have to give radiotherapy also. But is there any indication of sentinel lymph node biopsy for DCIS? No. Only if you are doing mastectomy, there is extensive DCIS, extensive microcalcification. You are removing the breast. You don't know whether in the final specimen invasive carcinoma will be detected. In that case, you will do a sentinel lymph node biopsy before doing the mastectomy. Just in case invasive carcinoma comes out in the final specimen, you will know that okay, I have assessed the axilla, it was negative, and you don't have to go back for an excision for dissection. What will you do if there are multiple papilloma? Which papilloma or papillomata indicate more risk of cancer or increased risk of cancer? Multiple papillomata, peripheral location, 3 cm away from the nipple. If the lady is young with scanty discharge, and if it is sessile, sometimes more of sessile polyps and papillomata. So these are the conditions which predispose to cancer. So if you have multiple papillomata and there is positive family history of cancer, then you can offer skin sparing mastectomy with implant or risk reducing mastectomy. They don't say prophylactic because even after doing prophylactic mastectomy, there are still some chances of development of cancer. So it is not called prophylactic, it is called risk reducing. It reduces the chance by 90%. So you can do that. If the patient has multiple papillomata, peripheral in location, and there is strong family history of cancer, you can counsel the patient. Age, if she is more than 40, family is complete, you can counsel the patient for. Now in young ladies where family is not complete, you can always go for microdocectomy if there is single duct involvement, or if you see 2-3 contiguous ducts are involved, you can do segmental. Only ducts in that segment you can remove.
This patient has 2 site of discharge.
So you can remove those 2 ducts if the patient is keen on having more children. But sometimes you will have no choice. You have to do radical duct excision, and the lady wants to have a child. So what will be your advice? You have done total duct excision, lady wants another child. What we do? We'll tell that, even if you become pregnant, you may not be able to feed from this breast, and it is advisable that you become pregnant after 1 year. Otherwise, there may be development of galactoseme. After 1 year, what happens? The ducts become fibrous. Whatever remnant ducts are there, that also becomes obliterated, and there is no more, ductal epithelium from which milk will be formed. So, after 1 year, if she becomes pregnant, galactoseme formation can be given. Now, what are the complications of radical duct excision? Ask questions for this topic before we move on to it. What are the complications? Nipple sensation may go. Number 2, necrosis of the nipple area. Number 3, persistence of discharge. Patient will come, say, I am having more discharge. What happens is you have removed the ducts, and there is an empty space behind the nipple areolar complex. There may be collection, and that will come out soon. So, persistence or recurrence of discharge. And so how will you prevent? The incision. Incision is generally periareolar. That has to be 1/3 to 1/4, not more than 1/3. 1/4 to 1/3, not more than 1/3 of the circumference of the nipple areolar complex. You will not try to raise flaps. You will create a tunnel. You will expose the duct, encircle the duct, then resect the ductal wall. You will not try to raise flaps of the areola. If you try, there will be necrosis. Okay. So, if the areola is very small, some patients are there, the nipple is prominent, but the areola is very small. There you can't access to 1/4 circumference of the areola. So there you do a vertical incision. Suppose from 6 o'clock on the areolocutaneous junction, you start the incision and you go vertically down on the breast parenchyma. Then you dissect from there, reach the ductal wall, and then repeat. One more thing, another very unlikely pathology, but involving the ducts could be encountered. That is atypical lobular hyperplasia and LCIS. With discharge, what will you do? Suppose preoperative ultrasound guided biopsy has detected this, then what will you do? And suppose you have already done total duct excision and then you have found this, then what will you do?
What is the status of LCIS now? LCIS?
No more.
But there is one variant. Pleomorphic. So on ultrasound guided biopsy, if you have found LCIS, you will just follow up the patient. You may do LCIS is one indication for MRI. You may do MRI and you will put the patient on tamoxifen. Okay. However, if it is pleomorphic LCIS, then excision is advised. Now, suppose you have done total duct excision. How will you decide whether it is ALH or LCIS? Again, there are two ends of the spectrum. If in your specimen more than 50% of the ducts are distended or full of cells, then more than 50% of the ducts are distended or full of cells, then you call it as LCIS. If less than 50% ducts are distended or full of cells, then you call it atypical lobular hyperplasia. Now, how do you define distension or full of cells? This term, there has to be some objectivity. If there is presence of more than 8 cells within one duct, then that duct is said to be distended or full. Okay, so more than 8 cells in one duct, it will be defined as distended or full. Such ducts comprising more than 50% of the specimen, it is LCI, is less than 50% of the specimen. So ALH. ADH আর DCI এর difference টা কিন্তু ঠিক আছে so এবার আমরা
now for discussion, some more discussions. You have a suspicious lesion in the duct on ultrasound and mammography. And is there a role for any advanced imaging? Advanced imaging? No. Now for nipple discharge evaluation, even MRI is a very ultrasound and MRI is a very good investigation. Because what mammography ultrasound cannot quantify, MRI can quantify about possible diagnosis.
And MRI guided biopsy has also come. So some centers are equipped with MRI guided biopsy also. Lesion not seen on ultrasound, not seen on mammography, may be detected on MRI. And in MRI you can see the kinetic characteristics of so it's called kinetic curves.
For management, we are not doing MRI. For management purpose, the discussion is all right. We have gone through the ultrasound, mammography, nipple discharge evaluation, and based on the scenario, we are going to this. But just for discussion, as we talk of advanced imaging in breast, one is MRI. Any other advanced imaging? Suppose you find a lump in the duct, and if it is a ductal papilloma or carcinoma, is there a role for doing elastography? You heard of elastography in breast tissue? Yes. So how it varies? How does the elastography help in evaluation of breast mass? Is there now evaluation? So more stiffer is the lump, chance of benignity or malignancy? Chance of malignancy. So they are more stiff lump. Elastography is more fibrotic. More stiff is more likely to be malignancy. Any other image?
Any special type of mammography? What is tomomography? Tomomography is just like you are doing, previously we used to have X-ray, one film for that. We have got several coronal sections. We are seeing each slice. So what happens is when you are doing mammography and if the breast is suppose very dense, so one tissue of one portion is overlapping on the other, and you will get a heterogeneous image. So you can take thin slices and you can see each slice, because suppose the lump is there at a particular depth in the breast and it continues to a particular depth. It is not in the entire expanse of the breast. So in that tomo films, you can see from which film to which film the lump is there. You can exactly characterize the location.
What do you call a milky discharge as pathological discharge? Milky discharge is usually a physiological discharge. When do you say that a milky discharge is a pathological discharge? It is not in the you see, sometimes pregnancy patient when not gone for lactation or even pre-lactation patient have some milky discharge.
So what is lactation period? When do you call discharges as not lactation?
Usually 6 weeks. Beyond that, see a lactation period.
Till it may start during pregnancy, continue through puerperia, and there will be a period of lactation. After 6 months of stoppage of lactation, even if lactation discharge is persistent or new discharge appears, that will be called non-lactational discharge.
Okay. So you have a pathological milky discharge. What is your thinking? Not always. It is not always that you have to have hyperprolactinemia to have milky discharge. Even hyperthyroidism can cause. What else? We discussed. One is hyperprolactinemia is one cause, which may not be always a pituitary tumor. Hyperprolactinemia may not be always a pituitary tumor. Drugs, some drugs, stress. Okay. So how do we address the issue? Patient has got pathological milky discharge. How do we address the issue?
What are the commonly available drugs?
What investigation need to do? what investigator need to do when a patient has got a pathology discharge? Yes, prolactin has to be done. Suppose you find prolactin is high, what next? You see, always high prolactin does not always mean that sometimes you can wait and see whether the patient has got any symptoms of because most of these prolactin tumors are maybe microadenomas. Okay. So if you find even if there is a polycyclic tumors, what is the therapy? What medical therapy? What drug interferes prolactin? What is the drug? In the market, Rajul is the great name. What is the drug? Okay, so these are prolactin inhibiting drugs. So you can use these drugs.
Cabergoline, how and what frequency we use? 0.5 milligram at 24 hours gap, and then repeat after 6 months.
It's not a very difficult scenario, but your approach should be correct. So given this in what scenario, your approach should be giving a good taking of history, then do a clinical examination, and at the end it will be answer of analytical assessment, that is remaining part of imaging and the cytology. And if the lump is not there on imaging, you cannot do imaging biopsy. Okay, in that case, at least you do discharge analysis.
Another thing should be kept in mind: vacuum assisted breast biopsies.
Yeah.
You can suppose architectural distortion is already detected. Do a vacuum assisted biopsy, put in a clip and then section. See what is the biopsy report, go back to the site.
So Tucker biopsy reveal is a invasive carcinoma. So what should be this patient? Patient has got invasive ductal carcinoma, and how do you plan treatment now? Depends on stage.
First, you investigate the stage the disease.
So if the patient has got an early carcinoma of breast, the staging is not very extensive. In that case, you evaluate the axilla. If that is N0, you may think of ASL and B. And you plan for a BCS. BCS followed by activate. So if it is a malignancy, the disease, treatment will depend on the stage. And obviously, this patient has got a nipple discharge and coming with a small lump, which is just image description. It's definitely early breast cancer. So you should be always keeping your mind open to face a one-round scenario. Okay.
From pituitary tumor, they may go into some symptoms also like prolactinomas, commonly found in which syndrome? 60%. Men one.
Shiani is pan-hyperthyroidism.
Yes, sir.
Describe the steps of modified radical mastectomy. So, when examiner take it, steps of modified radical mastectomy.
And arm has to be raised separate because while
just a minute, we have not taken feedback from the audience. Regarding nipple discharge, anybody has any question or any comments to make? Any query? We are here to answer. On nipple discharge, we have discussed how to evaluate a patient. We have discussed what are the important imaging to be done and how to decide treatment based on the diagnosis. Any question you can put in chat box? No problem. You can put question in chat box. No question. Okay, then we proceed for how to describe the steps of modified radical mastectomy. Okay, carry on. Proceed. The anesthesia, endocrine intubation, position.
Injection has to be made like that. It covers the tumor and epithelial complex. And then raising the skin flaps. Skin flaps has to raise like that. It has to be more, not more thick and not more thick to avoid the flap necrosis, skin necrosis later. So usually the thing is that we have to separate the subretinous and axial flap that thing has to do. The demarcation is subdermal flaps. You have to go that way. The upper skin duct has to raise to the clavicle and the lower skin duct of the inframammary piece and middle it's up to the external border and later up to the axis. We can reach the cross cut. And then third step is the removal of the breast mold and it has to start from the medial external upper fourth and some of the operating moves we let the lineage completed and we go from medial to the direction. And in the later part where we reach the axillary we'll suspend it. After reaching the later part, now we go for the axillary dissection. In the next after the now the breast is continuous only with the axillary. We will reach the later quarter of pectoralis region. After retract immediately, we will try to reset the axis now and the fat tissue and neck and so we will try to fill out and we'll retract now the pectoralis will retract immediately. So first we have to identify the axillary vein and whatever the structure we can't don't go beyond that because to avoid the whatever the lymphatic strains from arm, so we don't go beyond that axillary vein. And then
It's not clear. What is it? Don't go beyond axillary vein. What?
superior and
Yes. Beyond means axillary vein is going after the thoracic inlet. That means after the subclavius muscle. So the point is, you will not make the axillary vein bare all around. The idea of dissection is you make the axillary vein bare anterior and inferior.
Below and medial.
Okay. So beyond means you have to go till the subclavius muscle to take the level 3 notes. You are planning to do a complete axillary dissection. So carry on.
the input which are below the electrons minus muscle level 1 nodes and you need the pectoralis muscle.
Okay, coming to point by point rebut. How thick should be the flaps? What is the recent concept? Previously, they used to say that you go in the plane between the subcutaneous fat and the breast fat. Subcutaneous fat has small fat globules and big fat globules are for breast. But now it is said that there is one fascia or pre-mammary fascia described in radiological textbooks. It is demonstrated on radiological mammography also, but not described in GRACE. So you can go in the plane between in the plane which is just superficial to the pre-mammary fascia. The pre-mammary fascia is not a continuous fascia. It is fenestrated and its depth from the skin is variable in different quadrants. It can be up to beneath a depth of 1.8 centimeter in the upper outer quadrant also when the breast tissue is more dense. So keeping thick flaps is not a problem because it has been detected that all the ductular tissue, ductolobular tissue is beneath the pre-mammary fascia and the pre-mammary fascia is up to a depth of 1.8 centimeter in certain parts. Okay, so what you can do is while raising flaps, you can identify the whitish structure and just remain superficial. But there is no hard and fast. I mean, you can also follow the previous dictum also. Now coming to the next controversy regarding up to where will you raise the flap. Medially, you should not cross the lateral border of the sternum. That is fine. Superiorly, previously we used to say up to the clavicle or exposing the subclavius muscle. But now they're saying if you go through the breast anatomy, the breast extends from the second to the sixth rib. So why go up to the clavicle.
But in multiparous breast, that is except of nulliparous breast, second to sixth. But in multiparous breast, it goes from the clavicle. So for multiparous breast, you have to go up to the clavicle.
So what you do is, before you start your procedure, you mark the margins of the breast. And so because it is variable, so you mark the margins of the breast, go beyond the breast. You will see that when you reach, beyond the breast, you can see the pectoralis major muscle. Once you reach that, you need not go above. But another reason of going up to the clavicle is, more flap you raise, more the flaps will be pliable, and you can bring them together for closure without tension. So that just removing the breast is not your concern. You have to keep flaps which are without tension and can be easily approached. So that is the reason. Whenever you are answering something, you should have points in favor. So this is one point in favor of raising up to the clavicle. The other point is because in multiparous breast. So you should not be very dogmatic, or examiner is saying something and you have been taught up to seconds, so you will say no, it is up to seconds. Like that. Flexibility is the.
When you lift the breast off from the pectoralis major muscle, what you take with the breast? Yes.
Pectoralis fascia. What is the data in favor? And what advantage do you have by removing the fascia, and what disadvantage could you have? See, there has been a very old data, but there was a set difference, but the difference was not statistically significant. So they are saying that if the tumor is deep and is close or abutting the pectoralis fascia or muscle, then obviously we'll remove it. But if it is far away, then they have seen that by removing the fascia, there is increased chance of seroma. So you may keep it. But
now you tell what to say in the exam. In the exam, will you take the pectoral fascia with the standard description, or you?
Yes. But what is our general idea, general notion that pectoralis fascia, if it is removed, I am doing a more radical surgery, so chances of recurrence will be less. But it has been seen that by removing fascia, recurrence has occurred, which has involved the pectoralis major muscle. How? Because this fascia is a natural boundary. We are removing it. Recurrence occurs more in the skin. The skin is now in direct contact with the pectoralis major muscle. So if there is a recurrence, it will involve the pectoralis major muscle. So these are all hypotheses in that paper that they have given. It's a very old paper by Professor Handley and Dawson, I think. But the standard answer is, even now we are removing the pectoralis fascia, because whatever postulates they had given, that was not found to be, the result was not found to be statistically significant.
Stick to the standard description, and then examiner says, can it be spared? Yes, if the lump is superficial,
then you can give these points. But
fascia is spared.
But standard is you remove the pectoralis fascia. And inferior lower flap up to the inferior mammary. Now, how do you enter the axilla? This is an important question. What is foramen of Langer?
The axillary extension of the axillary.
It goes to the axillary fascia through a hole that is called the foramen of Langer. You may detect in some
You have
cases.
not told this step, what he is asking. As you go to the lateral pectoralis major muscle, what you have to do?
Suppression of the fascia.
Yes.
Sharp descent.
So, as you reach the lateral pectoralis major muscle, you size the axillary fascia at the lateral pectoralis major muscle, and then only you can enter the axilla. And once you enter the axilla, you keep in mind the extent of axillary dissection.
Now
you
you
tell us that extent, medial, lateral, and as I said, upper means axillary and below. What is that? Axillary vein means don't bear the superior surface of the axillary vein. Don't bear the superior surface. You keep confined to the anterior and inferior to the axillary vein. Why? Why are not bearing the superior margin of axillary vein? Arm lymphatics.
What is Mascagni pathway? Mascagni pathway. That is the alternate pathway of arm lymphatics. In some cases, lymphedema will not appear. In some cases, lymphedema will appear. So, those cases where lymphedema does not appear, there lymphatic goes through the Mascagni pathway, alternate pathway around the scapula and all, from the arms. So that is one outline which changes.
Now there is a newer imaging modality where you can map the upper limb lymphatics and spare these during surgery. What is that? How it is done?
Using what? Can you repeat? Two agents have been used. Three agents have been used, but commonly used one.
How can you mark? What?
Radioactive. Suppose radioactivity is not now. How can you use
Radioactivity is a thing you have to procure and you have to take precautions for so many things. But now a newer modality has come where not nipple is again not very convincing to have a.
You said that.
ICG.
Yes. You can look at the spike.
So you inject inside in the arm. Real time you can take this camera and that camera will show the indocyanine fluorescence.
Suppose you have given indocyanine beam from here and it is going there and you see that indocyanine beam is seeping into the operating field. That means you have cut one of those lymphatics. You can implant those by the lymphatic.
Now people are doing even to reduce the lymphedema, people are doing lymphovenous anastomosis. Okay. So this is important. Once you had going through this axillary fascia, you are in the axilla. Oh, you have not told the boundary.
Lower boundary.
Lower is angular vein.
Why angular vein? What is the philosophy behind angular vein? It is described that at the site where the angular vein branches off from the thoracodorsal vein, there the thoracodorsal nerve enters into the muscle. So by not going below the angular vein, you will not damage the nerve. This is one theory. But the entire nerve will be seen, will go to the angular vein, and if you try to go below the angular vein, you may damage the nerve at its point of entry into the muscle. But some surgeons have said that there is 2% chance of finding lymph nodes in between the angular vein. Suppose there is a triangle, base is angular vein, and the two other sides are latissimus dorsi muscle and the chest wall. So that triangle may have 2%. In 2% cases, there may be lymph nodes. But then again, that is not standard. Some of them will say. So some examiner may say, do you remove up to the angular vein? Then you say, mostly it is postulated up to the angular vein. But some surgeons are there is a school of thought where they say we have to remove nodes up to the apex of the triangle formed by the angular vein, latissimus dorsi, and the chest wall, where the latissimus dorsi intersects with the chest wall.
What are the important nerves you find while doing the angular dissection? And how do you take care? Start with the most medial. Nerve to more medial. Medial lateral pectoral, both nerves. Try to find that.
C-loop of the C-loop. So lateral pectoral nerve is medial, medial pectoral nerve is lateral.
So while dissecting between the two pectorals, if you are doing a patty is taking the pectoral minor from the coracoid.
What is the group of lymph nodes in between the two pectoralis major and pectoralis minor? Rotors. So you have to remove that. So often you will dissect. So you will encounter what? What are the structures encountered? What are the structures that pierce the pectoral fascia? Acromial branch of the thoracoacromial artery, lateral pectoral nerve, and lymphatics. So now long thoracic nerve you have said, it supplies which muscle? If it is damaged, what will happen?
Shoulder.
Where does it arise from? This may be asked. It's from the anterior ramus of C5, C6, sometimes C7. Even before formation of the arch point. It is not from the cord. So what is the other nerve that you encounter in tracking this? It's the branch of posterior cord of the brachial plexus. Now this posterior cord, anterior cord, not anterior, posterior medial lateral. Why are they named posterior, medial, lateral? With respect to what? Now, if there are two axillary veins, sometimes there are two axillary veins, then how will you limit your dissection? You limit yourself to the lower border of the lower one.
Why thoracodorsal pedicle is important is mastectomy, because the lateral limit of the dissection is thoracodorsal pedicle, and while dissecting this part, you should take utmost care not to damage the thoracodorsal pedicles. That means artery and the vein. Why? Yes. What construction? Yes. So if you are planning to have a LD flap reconstruction of the defect following mastectomy or a BCS, then in that case, you should take care of it. So if you damage this, you cannot take a LD flap.
What is that tissue in between the two nerves called? Suppose you have taken out the tissue separately, how will you level it for valves? It's called interneural tissue. And tissue lateral to the thoracodorsal pedicle, which does not need to be taken out. Suppose you have taken it out, you will send it as lateral axillary tissue. Now, how do you orient the specimen? What is the convention of orienting the specimen?
Short superior and long lateral.
Tie sutures, short superior, long lateral. It's very important.
Why is it important? Why do you need to mark the specimen? So pathologists will have a correct orientation, and they will take section from each of these margins to comment about any positive of the margin. Even in mastectomy, you may have a positive margin. This is more important in case of a breast conserving surgery.
When do you say that you have removed adequate number of nodes?
10.
Do you always remove level 3 nodes? What are the indications of your level 3 nodes?
Level 3 node should be removed in which situations? Suppose you are doing level or level 2, and while dissecting, can you decide, yes, this patient also merits to be have a level 3 dissection? If you are finding that there is cross level 1, level 2 involvement,
very bulky level 2 involvement, you will obviously do one level extra during the dissection. And if level 3 is itself enlarged, even in absence of level 1,
on imaging, you have demonstrated that level 3 is already involved. In that case,
so the entire axillary vein up to the outer border of the first rib, the lower border of that axillary vein has to be made bare. Now, what are the various methods of accessing the level 3 nodes?
How? One is fatigue. What is fatigue? From where? You don't remove the whole petrous minor. Petrous minor is a broad muscle. In fatigue, you don't remove the whole petrous. You don't excise all petrous minor muscle. You just divide the petrous minor insertion in the coracoid and return it down. That is one. Any other way? What's intrasis?
What is the Milan's or Hamid's technique of level 3 dissection? Pectoralis majorta, you will go beyond the pectoralis major and retract it radially. You will encircle the head of the pectoralis minor and lift it and retract it laterally. So you can see the lymph nodes in between the pectoralis major, you have retracted medially, pectoralis minor, you have retracted laterally. So that space opens up. That corresponds to the level 3 nodes. You can see the axillary vein disappearing beyond the outer border of the first rib. And you can remove all those tissues from this. This is called the Milan's technique.
And there is another publication from Calcutta, Professor Dasgupta. They have done a transpectoral approach. That means you have a pectoralis major muscle which has got a clavicular head and the sternocostal head. If you split this major muscle between the two heads, you can find the pectoralis minor muscle. In that case, you split it, medial to the petal minor, you are in the level 3 mode. Dissect. You retract the petal minor laterally and medially and take it out. And then at the end, you resuture this margin. Just published. It's not come in the book, but it's a very good technique. I was part of this project, but ultimately there's some other problem, but it is published in an Italian journal.
Next, from this you may be asked, how is the axillary vein formed?
That's attrition of the
One way.
Veni
Basilic.
comitatives of the brachial artery will join and basilic vein will combine and they will form the axillary vein. So this will be asked. What are the branches of axillary artery? Anatomy will be asked in operative.
Axillary artery has got three
Parts.
Parts.
Protita part, first part has one branch, superior thoracic. Second part has two branches, acromiothoracic, lateral thoracic. Third part has three branches. What are the branches? Anterior circumflex humeral, posterior circumflex humeral, and subscapular. Subscapular branch is a thoracodorsal artery. You have to know this because thoracodorsal is what you have. Okay. This one. Now what are the complications of axillary dissection? Quickly. Complications. How can you prevent lymphedema? What is the percentage of lymphedema? Up to 30%. Now, name some procedure which can reduce the morbidity of lymphedema? Sentinel lymph node biopsy. What is the incidence of lymphedema in sentinel lymph node biopsy? 5 to 11%. Now, suppose you have done ALAT, you are discharging the patient. What will be the advice? Exercises. Avoid pin prick to that arm. Previously, they used to say don't even check BP, but now they're saying when you are treating lymphedema with pressure and compression, then why should you not check BP? So that has been taken out. So you should avoid pin prick.
When should exercise start? When should? Previously, they used to say after 2 weeks. Yes. So early exercise.
Graded increase.
Graded increase.
Another study has been there that you can put patients on prophylactic benzathine penicillin 3 weekly for 1 year after surgery to avoid occurrence of. Question. Suppose you do not have the facility of sentinel lymph node biopsy, you are not wanting to do axillary lymph node dissection, you may do anatomic axillary sampling. What are the boundaries of anatomic axillary sampling? So you remove nodes below the intercostobrachial node, and medial to the lateral thoracic vein. Their maximum number of lymph nodes are like that. Okay.
Any question? Any question from any of the participants? Because the point is, when you describe the operative step, describe the standard operative steps, and then let the examiner interfere in between. But my point is, if you can describe the steps properly, nobody will interfere, and try to describe in salient steps, such as incision. Second heading is raising of skin flap. Third heading is raising the breast along with the lung. Fourth is axillary node dissection. Fifth is secure hemostasis. Placement of tray. Closer.
So operation A, you figure out the steps and some important anatomical landmarks which you will mention in your description so that examiners can ask you questions on that. You have to tease the examiner with certain important aspects.
Any operation you divide into broad steps.
How can you reduce seroma? Raising flaps with scalpel or diathermy or ligation? Seroma is this.
Cold knife.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.